Most nothing. Okay, thank you very much. Tá buíochas an deis Laoghaire ar an bille seo. It is my firm view, and I believe it is as good as a fact, that the rental crisis is worse than ever. Rent continues to rise unabated. People are losing their homes and unable to find a new home. And we are seeing the practical outworkings of that in our constituency offices on a daily basis. People who are in absolutely desperate situations, who have exhausted all options in trying to stay in that home, and have sought time and time again to find other suitable accommodation that fits within their HAP allowances, and it is just impossible. In Cork City, rents are up 13.7% year on year, based on the most recent figure, well above the national figure of 11.3%, and a considerable amount above the 4% increase allowed for in the rent pressure zone. And Minister, as my colleague Ona Bryn outlined yesterday, I think this bill is a recognition that the rent pressure zones are not working properly, because you could not have that level of increases were they working correctly. You could not have that level of eviction and people facing homelessness and unable to find alternative accommodation if that was the case. Currently, a modest two-bed in Cork costs about 1,114 a month. 3 beds, generally between 1,200 and 1,014 or 1,400. But very many perfectly ordinary homes are well above this too, into 1,500, 1,600, and above that even. It is my firm view that rebuilding Ireland is not working and won't work. Its targets are inadequate. It does not take a strong enough line on the rental crisis. We believed in 2016 that the solution was rent certainty. I believe we have now reached the point that it is such an emergency that we need a rental freeze as an emergency measure, accompanied by relief for the tenants as opposed to the landlords, who have done very well, I think financially, many of them, out of this current crisis. There is also inadequate targets for social housing and affordable housing building. Scarcely an affordable house built under any scheme under this government's term. And that is a huge gap, because there are so many people who do not qualify for social housing, who may be working but on modest incomes, who have practically no real options at the minute. And the lack of action on affordable housing is a cause of great frustration, and I think I'm not terribly optimistic for the future either, but it is something I would ask the Minister to prioritise, because there is so many people out there who are just locked out of the housing market, and it's leading people, particularly from my generation, it's difficult to plan for the future when you cannot afford a mortgage, you do not qualify for any state schemes, and the affordable housing is not within reach. It becomes your money is eaten up by extortionate rents month on month. And I know you'll be familiar with this issue, and I'm sure many of your peers and your colleagues are in similar situations, that rent is that expensive that it just becomes difficult to see more than 2 or 3 years down the line. And that it creates a high level of insecurity, and it's my belief not enough is being done on that. The bill does provide for some generally useful things, and we will acknowledge that. There are some quibbles we might have with elements of them. Some of these issues were previously identified by ourselves and others during previous debates on residential tenancies bills, but it is welcome that they are now being addressed. The whole area of additional powers to investigate landlords and impose sanctions, that's right and proper, but it needs resourcing. And this comes as an issue in a number of areas. As Deputy Curran outlined, the rate of inspections isn't high enough. There are many people who are well, there's 2 levels to this that I want to identify. Firstly, there are many people who are not registered and who are taking advantage of the fact that there are who, I suppose, feel that perhaps they have more flexibility if they don't register, illegally of course, and obviously that disqualifies them from HAP, and you regularly deal with people who say that the landlord or the prospective landlord won't accept HAP, and very often you find out that's very likely because the landlord isn't registered. We need to make it practically impossible for a landlord not to be registered. But there's also the incidents, and the issue was touched on there about good landlords and bad landlords. And of course, there are good landlords. I'm a tenant myself, and I have to say I'm very satisfied with my own landlord. I have no complaints at all. But there is a power imbalance. I don't think it's the same thing as saying there are good tenants and bad tenants. This is a market which currently favours the landlord. That's a reality, that's a structural reality that's built into the housing market at the minute. And it does make it easy for those who wish to exploit. It is very difficult for those who are being exploited to escape those circumstances. And one of the examples is those who wish to complain a landlord, who are living in dire circumstances, damp housing, overcrowded housing, housing that is badly damaged, needs repair and all the rest of it. That's barely fit for human habitation sometimes. But because they know that it's going to be very hard to find another landlord who will accept HAP within their limits, very often they go to the landlord and the landlord does nothing, knowing full well that the tenant isn't in a position to realistically complain because they won't be in a position to find another tenancy. So, and I'll wrap up on this, if we are going to give additional powers to investigate landlords and impose sanctions, there needs to be significant resources allocated to it. And just, I suppose, finally as well, there is a need for more legislative change. On the HAP issue, I know some local authorities and minority local authorities have found some flexibility on this. People who are on HAP should be on the main transfer list. At this point of the transfer list, I don't think it's adequate. Many people aren't aware of it, probably don't fill out the form correctly and end up being taken off the list entirely. Those people need to be reintegrated into the main list, and that should be done through nationalisation. And I would also believe the extended notice periods are welcome, and I support that. But if you are serious about preventing people being evicted into homelessness, extended notice periods will not fully address that. That can only be done, I believe, through the adoption of the Focus Ireland Amendment to prevent evictions into homelessness.